Nvidia GeForce RTX 5080 review. Hello, welcome to your channel. The GeForce RTX 5080 is Nvidia's new $1,000 GPU offering, coming in at half the price of the RTX 5090 with, unsurprisingly, half the specs. You get half the cores, half the memory bus, half the VRAM, and almost half the memory bandwidth. Nvidia has created a massive gap between the 5080 and 5090, clearly aiming to upsell gamers on the much faster and far more expensive RTX 5090 for those who can afford one. Additionally, this approach leaves them plenty of room to release more costly GeForce 50 Super Series cards within the next 12 months, addressing the obvious VRAM limitations present in much of the Blackwell lineup. So that's fun. In terms of specifications, the RTX 5080 is only a minor upgrade over the RTX 4080 Super, which it is set to replace. The GeForce RTX 5080 features just 5% more cores, clocked a mere 3% higher. The only meaningful upgrade is the shift to GDDR7 memory, which on the same 256-bit wide memory bus boosts bandwidth by 30% thanks to its 30 gigabits per second memory speed. Deja vu? You might as well call this the RTX 4080 Super. The previous gen RTX 4080 Super likely wasn't heavily memory limited, so the improvements here are expected to result in only a modest performance gains. Of course, we're about to dive into the numbers to confirm this. RTX 5080 versus RTX 4080 thermals. Before diving into the blue bar graphs, let's take a look at how Nvidia's Founders Edition version of the RTX 5080 handles thermals compared to the RTX 4080 FE. For this test, we used The Last of Us Part 1 running at 4K with maxed out settings. After an hour of load inside an enclosed ATX case, the RTX 5080 reached a peak GPU temperature of 63 degrees Celsius, remarkable given how quiet and compact this graphics card is. The fan speed peaked at 1,400 RPM and was virtually inaudible over our already very quiet case fans. The cores maintained an average clock speed of 2,655 MHz, with an average GPU power draw of 266 watts. Meanwhile, the memory temperature peaked at 72 degrees Celsius, operating at a frequency of 2,500 MHz for a transfer speed of 30 gigabits per second. By comparison, the RTX 4080 FE peaked at 62 degrees Celsius, with a memory temperature of 74 degrees Celsius and fans spinning at just over 1,300 RPM. It's clear that the RTX 5080 design is more efficient, at least in terms of physical size. However, when ignoring the size difference, the thermal performance between the two cards is nearly identical. So, while the new FE model delivers great results in terms of thermals and efficiency, the real question is, how does it perform in terms of FPS? Let's find out. Marvel Rivals. Starting with Marvel Rivals at 1440p, the new RTX 5080 achieved 108 frames per second, making it just 8% faster than the 7900 XTX and 14% faster than the 4080 Super. It was also only 9% slower than the 4090, which isn't bad considering it should cost significantly less. Now, let's check out the 4K results. At 4K, the 5080 looks slightly more impressive, now showing a 16% lead over the 4080 Super and a 12% advantage over the 7900 XTX. While it is faster, the improvement isn't particularly significant in this scenario. Stalker 2, Heart of Cornabill. Next, we have Stalker 2, where the 5080 is only 4% faster than the 4080 Super at 1440p and just 3% ahead of the 7900 XTX. Moving to 4K doesn't change much. Here, the new 5080 is 4% faster than the 7900 XTX and 9% faster than the 4080 Super, resulting in unimpressive gains. God of War Ragnarok. The God of War Ragnarok results were also disappointing. At 1440p, the 5080 was just 4% faster than the 4080 Super and again fell behind the 7900 XTX, though only by a few frames. The 4K results are more promising, with the 5080 pulling ahead of the 7900 XTX by 9% and the 4080 Super by 8%. However, for a next-generation product, this is still a letdown. Though at least in this case, it was faster. Warhammer 40,000, Space Marine 2. The Space Marine 2 results are better, but still, the RTX 5080 was only 6% faster than the 4080 Super at 1440p and 18% faster than the 7900 XTX. At 4K, we see a 21% improvement over the 4080 Super, making it one of the better results so far. The 5080 was also 27% faster than the 7900 XTX, which is at least a more competitive showing. Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty. Even in Cyberpunk 2077, performance remains underwhelming. At 1440p, the RTX 5080 was just 9% faster than the 4080 Super and 7% ahead of the 7900 XTX. Moving to 4K helped the 5080 slightly, but it was still only 10% faster than the 7900 XTX and 16% faster than the 4080 Super. Disappointingly, these are among the better margins we've seen for the new 50 series GeForce GPU. Star Wars Outlaws. The Star Wars Outlaws results are equally disappointing. At 1440p, the 5080 was just 3% faster than the 4080 Super, though it did hold a 16% advantage over the 7900 XTX. At 4K, the 5080 was only 5% faster than the 4080 Super and 17% ahead of the 7900 XTX. Performance summary. Although we didn't go over the 1080p numbers in detail, here's the average data for those interested. Essentially, the GeForce RTX 5080 only managed to match the 4080 Super at this resolution. It seems the Blackwell architecture struggles slightly more than previous generations at lower resolutions, and this isn't always due to a CPU bottleneck. At 1440p, we're looking at a mere 4% performance increase for the RTX 5080 over the 4080 Super, just 4% on average or 5% over the 7900 XTX. That said, it's still better than the 2% uplift we saw from the 4080 to the 4080 Super, so perhaps things are improving after all. At 4K, the results don't improve much. Sure, the 5080 was, on average, 11% faster, so at least we hit double digits, but that's still quite underwhelming for a next-gen GPU. Compared to the original RTX 4080, it's only 14% faster, and when stacked against AMD's nearest competitor, it offers just an 8% gain over the 7900 XTX. Power consumption. The good news is that power consumption is quite reasonable, at least based on our 1440p testing. Here, the 5080 consumed anywhere from 4% to 19% less power than the 4080 Super and significantly less than the Radeon RX 7900 XTX. Ray tracing performance. Unfortunately, the RTX 5080 doesn't offer anything particularly impressive when it comes to ray tracing, delivering only an 11% increase over the 4080 Super at 1440p in Metro Exodus. However, this did make it nearly 50% faster than the 7900 XTX. As we always say, if you care about ray tracing performance, a GeForce GPU is the way to go. At 4K, the results are similar, with the 5080 showing a 14% improvement over the 4080 Super. Ray tracing. Alan Wake 2. The Metro Exodus results are not an anomaly. In Alan Wake 2 at 1440p, there is very little difference between the 4080 Super and the 5080 in ray tracing performance. At 4K, there is some separation, but even then, the 5080 only pulls ahead of the 4080 Super by 12%. A highly underwhelming result. Ray tracing. Cyberpunk 2077. Phantom Liberty. The Cyberpunk 2077 results tell the same story, with the 4080 Super and 5080 delivering comparable performance at 1440p. At 4K, using quality upscaling with the Ultra Ray Tracing preset, the 5080 averaged just 50 frames per second, making it only 6% faster than the 4080 Super. Ray tracing. Dying Light 2 Stay Human. We saw a 9% uplift in Dying Light 2 at 1440p for the 5080 over the 4080 Super, which, surprisingly, is one of the better ray tracing gains observed so far. At 4K, the margin extended slightly to 10%, but at least the 5080 was 55% faster than the 7900 XTX. Ray tracing performance summary. The GeForce RTX 5080 and 4080 Super delivered nearly identical performance with ray tracing turned on at 1080p, making the 5080 nearly 80% faster than the 7900 XTX. At 1440p, the 5080 was just 5% faster than the 4080 Super, while Radeon GPUs remained largely irrelevant in this category. Finally, at 4K with quality upscaling, the RTX 5080 was, on average, 9% faster than the 4080 Super. So much for improved ray tracing performance. What we learned. So there you have it, the GeForce RTX 4080 Ti Super. Actually, it's probably not even that good. In terms of cost per frame, the 4080 Super offered nearly 20% better value than the 4080, whereas the RTX 5080 appears to be, at best, just 10% better value than the 4080 Super. Some may argue that the RTX 5080 should be compared to the original 4080, but that's nonsense. The RTX 4080 was essentially a failed product, and that's not even referring to the unlaunched AD104 version. The $1,200 RTX 4080 we ultimately received was a disappointment, and most gamers agreed by not buying any. This led to stock sitting on shelves, forcing Nvidia to release the 4080 Super, which was essentially the same GPU in terms of performance, but with a $200 price cut. Given that, it only makes sense to compare the RTX 5080 with the 4080 Super. Once you do, it quickly becomes clear that there's very little new on offer. Features like multi-frame generation can be useful, but they are highly situational. For the most part, you're not missing out on much, and the most exciting DLSS 4 features will be available on previous RTX GPUs anyway, which is great. GeForce 30 series owners take note. For those still using GeForce RTX 30 series GPUs and holding out for nearly 5 years, the RTX 5080 is 67% faster than the RTX 3080, but comes with a 43% price increase. Adjusting for inflation, that price increase is closer to 20%. If we recalculate cost per frame with inflation in mind, the RTX 5080 has improved by 28% relative to the 3080. So, after all this time, it's not exactly an amazing upgrade. Without question, the 5080 comes with a premium, and a similar performance jump could have been achieved at least 6 months ago with the 4080 Super. Closing thoughts. Looking back at the flagship GeForce RTX 5090, it delivers a somewhat disappointing gen-on-gen boost, providing approximately 30% more performance for what will be at least a 25% price increase. However, since this is more of a price-is-no-object product, value can be overlooked to some extent in favor of raw performance. We just wish there was more to it. Now, if you consider that was underwhelming, then what should we make of the RTX 5080? If the RTX 5080 launches slightly above $1,000 and closely aligns with the 4080 Super in terms of value, then it really doesn't matter which one you buy. Of course, you might as well get the 5080 since it's newer, but beyond that, there's no compelling reason to choose it, and certainly no reason to pay a premium. For the RTX 5080 to avoid the same fate as the original 4080, sitting on shelves unsold, it simply cannot be priced above $1,000. Hopefully, its manufacturer's suggested retail price will be more reasonable than how the 5090 is shaping up. However, once reviews go live, we'll get a clearer sense of how the community feels, and it's unlikely to be well received.